So I got a comment on my last video asking me to kind of go over how the awning works, specifically the pivot point and the awning material, how I sewed it. So yeah, let me go through that real quick. I want to preface this by saying I got most of this from Patrick Remington. I got the base awning from him, and then I kind of just took his design and made it freestanding. Lastly, I'm going to go through everything pretty quick, but I'm going to have the camera set up there, and then I'll add in close-up shots while I'm talking about certain things. Anyways, in the words of the Slingshot channel,
let me show you its features.
So I'll start with the awning housing. So the awning housing is made up of 2 pieces of aluminum angle and a piece of aluminum flat, all riveted together with some 1/4-inch steel flat on the back. Next, I reinforced the awning housing with this piece of steel flat. I cut and welded to have shaped like this. And then I took a bolt and put it right through so that it made a pivot point for all of the awning poles to attach to. To make each of these awning poles, I took an 8-foot piece of galvanized conduit and I cut about a 3 or 4-inch piece off, put a hole through it, and then took a piece of heater hose and attached it back on to the original piece of galvanized conduit. I know that's a bit confusing, but that's what I did. I did this because if the poles for some reason fall, I don't want all that stress on the actual awning housing, so they should bend at that heater hose, and then it's just rubber, so it's fine. Everything I've explained up to this point is in Patrick Remington's video, but everything I explain from now on is going to be how I made it freestanding and what I did different. So this part right up here above the pivot point is, I don't even know what to call this thing, but it's the rod that the wires hook into so that they hold up the awning poles. This thing flips up and down, and it's really convenient because it allows me to make this thing freestanding without having a big pole standing off the top of my 4Runner. This flip-up rod is mounted to a piece of steel angle that I cut up and welded together to have this mounting rod right above the pivot point of these awning rods. This is crucial in making the awning poles stay where you want them, so they're not trying to pull from one side to another. Obviously, with something like this, you just have to make sure that you check clearances as you're going in and out of garages and stuff like that. Also, you have to flip this thing down because if you keep it up, you're gonna hit something. All right, guys, moving along to what I think is the hardest part of the whole build, and that's the actual awning. So this thing took me like a week to do, and I had no templates to go off, and I'd never done this before, especially when you didn't have a piece, parent piece big enough to fit the actual like quadrants. So I had to cut it up and sew it all together. So it was definitely a pretty good learning experience. This canvas is also pretty thick and stiff, so getting it to go through the sewing machine at the right angle and keeping it straight-ish was definitely a challenge within itself. Every piece I added on, it was just getting more and more cumbersome. The last piece I put on probably took 2 or 3 hours, but when it was done, I think it looked amazing. I'll show a video of it right now. One important tip that I learned from making this awning was to cut the edges of the awning in a bit, actually curve them in just a tiny bit. So at the center, I went up 3 inches, and then I took that point and drew it out all the way to the corners, and that made it so that when the awning is pulled tight, it doesn't try to curl up on you. I actually used a waterproof canvas, and I used some outdoor upholstery thread. This stuff seemed pretty tough, honestly, and it's held up really well so far. Besides that, I attached a wire to the end of these poles and ran it all the way up to this flip-up mounting pole on top of the awning. These wires have a hook on one side that hooks right into the top of that mounting pole, and that's what keeps everything up. One other thing I should definitely mention is this awning is connected to the hooks that hook in to the flip-up mount. That's very important because it keeps one side of the awning on this side of the awning housing, and the tips of the poles keep the other side all the way at that end. It makes it far easier to put away and put up. You may also want to attach something on the wires that hold up the awning poles. This will allow you to not have to mess with them as you're taking it apart. You can just unhook it from the top. It'll also help to keep one side of your awning into this pivot point so that you can roll it up way easier as well. This part is honestly necessary. I use gear ties for mine at the moment. If you have anything better to think of, please let me know in the comments because there's got to be a cleaner way to do this. So the last thing I want to talk about is the cover. This thing goes all the way around the awning, and the straps that I made pull over from the top to make it into a little waterproof burrito for the awning to sit in. I tried to dye these straps with coffee actually because I had a lot of coffee and no fabric dye, but I don't know if I didn't leave it in the coffee long enough or what, but yeah, these could look better. So no matter how much coffee you have, I would just recommend fabric dye. So on each end of the cover, I have it doubled up with double canvas with the canvas side pointing in. As you can see, it's one side canvas and one side waterproof. So it's a lot more durable, obviously, with the canvas side in. And honestly, that's about it. A DIY 270 freestanding awning for under $215. I have a few shorts kind of showcasing the building process if you want to check out those. And besides that, that's about it. Have a good day, guys. If you have any more specific questions, leave them in the comments below and I'll reply to them and try to answer them as best I can. Thanks.